Today we're using an EMG machine to test different bicep exercises. Why is that important? Why should you even care? Well, have you ever done a cross-body hammer curl? Most people do these for the brachialis. Turns out, it's actually a horrible exercise for the brachialis. Partially because every time I do them, I end up running into my overly developed chest, but also because when I tested it with the EMG machine, I ended up getting more activation of the long head and short head. We're gonna go over all the exercises you've been basically wasting your time with, and it will blow your mind. It seemed like everything I thought I knew once I tested it turned out to be a lie. For example, it's common knowledge that incline curl hits more long head because you're putting it in a stretch position. The fact that it crosses over shoulder, elbow joint, short head brachialis only cross over the elbow joint. It makes sense. That is not what happened. It's the fucking worst. Turns out it's a battle between your brachialis and your short head to see which one can generate the most force. Really? What the fuck? My first thought is there's no way this machine's accurate. I can't be the first douchebag to spend his money on a machine like this with a superficial goal of hypertrophy and test this and figure this out. Something's wrong. Because otherwise my entire training career has been a fucking lie. Seriously, Google how to train a long head. One of the first results is always an incline dumbbell curl. And I tested it. I tested every single angle you could use on the bench. I tested the cable variation. I even had an overly muscular woman come in and verify my results. And it sucks. And this racked my brain. It doesn't make sense. It should work. You're putting that bicep in a stretch position, long head. It wasn't until I found this case study that I finally understood how dumb we all are. It has been done before, and they found the same exact thing. The reason they said the incline dumbbell curl was poor in terms of long head activation is because it stretches it beyond the optimal length, leading to inefficient actin-myosin coupling. Now, is the science perfect? No. In fact, someone made an adorable cartoon video explaining how imperfect it is, and there's some things I agree with, but some things I definitely don't. One thing I do agree with is an EMG, this device, doesn't actually measure muscle activation, it measures neuromuscular excitation. But this is, without a doubt, the best tool we have in regards to measurement. To discard this is to discredit tens of thousands of studies and assume there's some sort of dysfunction between the signal being sent and the muscle actually contracting. I can't control whether or not you took your Flintstone vitamins, now your sodium potassium pump is off. And the reason I chose this exact machine is how precise it is. You can actually measure the different levels of excitability throughout the same muscle. Why is that important? Because not all exercises are created equal, and most will generate different levels of torque throughout the muscle at various points through the range of motion, therefore exciting those nerve cells that are throughout your muscle with varying levels of intensity. Here's a good example. I put a sensor towards the distal and proximal end of my short head, towards the bottom and the top. This is the sensor placed at the bottom. This one is the one placed at the top. When I did a supinated bicep curl, I got a greater response and potentially greater contractile force out of the fibers at the lower end of my short head. But when I did concentration curls, I actually created a greater response and would potentially generate a greater contractile force in those fibers at the proximal end. Now, does this mean you should go knock on the door of everybody who said that concentration curls are a bad exercise and put your shiny little tea bag on their forehead? Maybe. What it tells me more than anything else is that exercise variability is critical. If you don't know what to do a lot of things, especially when you consider the fact that I did several of these tests. On this particular one, I did the supination curl and then went right into the concentration curl. And even with fatigue factored in, I got more activation out of the upper end, that proximal end of my short head. And even though it's not a one-to-one between excitability and activation, you can't tell me that having less excitability is a fucking good thing. Another argument that drove me crazy that I saw a lot of people making is they said that incline curls were actually a great exercise in spite of the fact they put your long head at a disadvantage. It's because you're not factoring in passive tension. In layman's terms, it's when you stretch. You know the shit you did in elementary school PE class when you crossed one leg over the other and you leaned forward and you got a whiff of your own balls? That's the building blocks of an incredible exercise. Now, this is where we're going to blow out the O-ring of that theory. Now, I am a fan of weighted stretches. In the last full gym program I just put out, the end of every back and chest day, we ended it with a 60-second extreme stretch under load. But they can't be the foundation of your training. If that was the case, then you would just sit on the incline bench, grab a heavy-ass weight, and lower it for 10 minutes straight, and then hold that stretch. The goal is active tension. That's what the fuck we're doing. When you think of high cable curls, you think short head activation, which is true when your elbows are forward. But the moment you exaggerate that external rotation and put that long head on stretch, but not to the point it actually inhibits activation like it does with the incline curl, you've now, based upon EMG data, got the most activation out of your long head and have that passive stretch that everybody seems to be in love with. So for me, this exercise, based upon all the testing I've done, is the best exercise for your long head. So go fuck yourself. Now let's go over what I found to be the best exercise for targeting your brachialis. And just so we're clear and you understand why I picked this exercise, in my opinion, if your goal is to build muscle, then you should be trying to isolate down to whatever muscle you're targeting as much as humanly possible. This machine made me realize exactly how hard it is to do that. Damn it, I blinked. Previously, I thought it was as simple as just rotating your wrist. You want to hit more short head, you take a supinated grip. Long head's neutral, pronated hits more brachialis. But it turns out it's a lot more complicated than that because you also have to factor in internal and external rotation of your shoulder as well as the position of your body in relation to gravity. So good luck. But you can definitely do it, especially when you're trying to target your brachialis. When you take a pronated grip and do a concentration curl, it almost completely turns off the activation to your long and short head, and the brachialis is the primary driver of the movement. And I always thought that reverse grip straight bar curls were predominantly brachialis. Not the case. And it makes sense the more you think about it. Because those shoulders are internally rotated and you have a pronated grip, you end up inhibiting that short head, and because you're curling up on a path that is directly in line with your long head, this actually, based upon all the tests I've done so far, ends up being the second best exercise I've found for your long head. So to recap, the best way to really isolate down and target your brachialis is by pairing the pronation of your wrist with the internal rotation of your shoulder. So exercises like a concentration curl with a pronated grip, or that same grip with the cross-body cable curl with your arm fixed against the machine. This background looks like I died. In my attempt to try to isolate the short head, I started to realize what finicky little pieces of shit those bicep muscles are because they're all trying to work in unison to do the same job, so you really have to manipulate your form. For example, the best exercise I found is when I jammed my arm up to a bench that was on a steep incline and did dumbbell curls. But I also had to make sure the elbow was slightly in front of me, and I put that shoulder in external rotation because the moment I turned back in, I got more long head activation. And it had to be a supinated grip because the moment I started screwing with my wrist, weird shit would happen. Also, the support and angle of this bench matters because if you try to do it just standing in place, the other bicep muscles jump in and ruin your life. Now, there's still so much we can cover just with biceps alone, but I'm gonna leave it up to you guys. If you think this is interesting and it adds value, we'll keep going. If you don't like what amounts to the homeschooled version of scientific training, then we'll move on. And don't get mad at me if you were homeschooled. That was your mom's dumb idea. Quick, what's the capital of Arkansas? All the programs are linked below. Again, 30 days, 20 videos, 20 bucks. Pretty damn simple. The tricep version of this video will be somewhere over here. And if anybody knows someone that does drywall that's not a piece of shit, that would be helpful.